Hi, everyone. Welcome to Currency Podcast episode 125. Let's see the audio. Let's look at the gain on this. Let's look at the gain on this old Mikey earphone. It was actually like all the way down, so it's a good thing I adjusted it. I'm the great adjuster. So on this in my career mode, I'm playing the Legends Championship. I'm through 9 holes. I'm 2 under. Let's get it. And by that I mean start where I left off. Let me continue what I was doing before. Maybe you... Yeah, I did announce on Facebook that I would stop doing this podcast, but it didn't stop, and I'm trying to raise awareness for it, that it's continuing. I just don't know what I'm about to do next, so sometimes I think that a podcast is over when it's actually not. That's what happens for me. Because I get it in my head that everybody hates me for doing this. I'm like, oh, I have to stop. But then time passes and I realize that it's just as silly as it's always been. I mean, it's hard for me to pull off what I'm doing. It makes fun of podcasts generally, but like what... The reason you should watch this podcast is because I am great. I wish it was better than that just my family and friends would see it or whatever. I guess there's kind of like being on stage way of talking, and then there's like, oh, I am just here, and these are just the things that I'm thinking or whatever. Taking a step back, sinking into yourself is important, or it's important to remember that, even if I was doing this or if I was on a stage, really. Because when I get on a stage, sometimes I'll have a bad podcast episode, like when I do stand-up. I mean, it happens a lot to me. I'm not that good of a stand-up comedian. My personality might be better suited for improv, but it's not... it's not stopping me to this point. I'll figure out a way to be good on stage. It might just take me a long time. But anyway, this is like the best podcast on the internet as far as I'm concerned, as far as anybody is concerned, as long as I promise that I won't try to be funny or try to make jokes like, oh, this is a funny time. It's actually better if I am trying to be wise, or like if I contribute something original that nobody's heard before. That's the whole point. But it's really like nobody expects you to go up and try to say things like you have something to say. And that's what's funny about it is people think that you act like people would think that I'm trying to say that I know things when it's really just kind of a big joke, because I don't. Because why would I get up and say anything like make this podcast if I, like, the reason I'm able to do it is because I don't know anything, and it's goofy that I would get up and be like, oh, you should listen to me talk. And so as long as that is possible, why not record it and then make it available to people? But I guess I feel that way about stand-up as well. I guess, like, if you're doing well at that, you remember that it does not matter what you have to say. But I just get into it. I really play to people's perceptions too much. Like, caring about what other people think is part of the fun or part of the joke when you start to be what other people like would imagine you would be just based on the way that something looks. I like to play the role. I mean, I don't like it. I just get stuck. I just fall into the trap of playing the role. It's not comfortable for me to play a role. And let me be more specific about what I'm saying. Like, I work for the federal government. As of now, I am trying to quit by Friday, as long as I get this other job that I think that I've gotten, but they're being kind of vague about whether or not I got it. It's like they made me agree that I accepted the position without really formally handing it to me. Um, I guess I don't want to talk or like this is the place that I'm going to go because I don't want to screw anything up, but like I'm trying to switch jobs because I have integrity and I like to do the things that I would say that I'm going to do. It's just my honesty, it's my conscience. That's what produces a podcast like this. That's what's behind it. Ultimately, it's just somebody as honest as me. That's the only thing that could just make a podcast like this when I am not known by anybody, that I just come out of whatever, that I just like put myself on the internet when I'm not famous at all. But that's part of the joke, is just oh yeah, I'm famous. I love it. I love famousness. Um, the joke that you're famous. I'm writing a song about being famous. I've written all. No, I mean, I wrote the chords for it. That's how famous I am. I wrote a song. It's called Famous. It's about being famous. But it's funny when, like, when I make a song. I made an official song in FL Studio a couple years ago, and then like I post on Facebook. It's funny that like I have to try to explain to my family and friends that like, oh, I'm in the business of making songs, or it's like I see myself that way. It's like coming out of the closet basically. But I'm trying to explain why I make this podcast or anything like that. Because you can't make a song like where I sing about that I'm famous when I'm not famous at all. But that's what this podcast is for. Because people are fucking silly about that. They think that you don't. People are afraid of pretentiousness, or like the thing that people hate the most is somebody who looks like they're not making good on what they're saying. But something like fame or like making music, you have to act like you're the shit even from the beginning, even when you're not. Like that's something that's difficult for somebody starting out writing songs, is just that it's an industry where you have to act like everything is so glamorous, or like you already made it or whatever. You have all this shit to brag about, but you don't have anything to brag about like on your first couple songs, really. You haven't proven anything, and you have no fandom. But like this is the best podcast on the internet as far as anybody's concerned. What are you going to do? Watch The Blocks with Neil Brennan? I caught a couple of those, and they're crap because Neil Brennan is a bad interviewer. But even the Joe Rogan Experience right now kind of sucks. Most of the episodes are crap. But really, like, the entire 2,000 episode catalog, most of them are crap. I mean, to me as a listener, I would have specific enough taste that I wouldn't connect with like a vast majority of the episodes. A vast majority of them would be boring to me, but it would be like that for any one person. Mostly all podcast material is crap. I guess you're just listening for something. If you like podcasts, you're just listening for some conspiracy or some new idea, some new concept. But the culture, the way that it is right now, they're very cynical towards new ideas or philosophy, or like somebody like me who's saying they have something to say because they just see it as pretentiousness or being a goon, like or being a clown. too many goons and clowns out and about walking around. Like people are afraid of BS, so they think that they're really cool for knowing about that. There are BS talkers walking around, because everybody is fake. And now we all realize it, that everybody is saying shit that they can't back up at all. Like just the tolerance for people sharing a white lie of a story, borderline good story, that people have no tolerance for it, or like, but like Twitter versus Instagram, for example. Let me say something to you. Here it is. But like, why is anybody talking at all? If everybody, it's like, oh, don't say anything because your stories are bullshit. But people are talking. They are trying to communicate something. It's just that the same with a podcast. Probably like 90% of the shit coming out of people's mouths is bullshit. Maybe that's just American culture. But like, it would be American culture. That would be an advantage of American culture. Or maybe not so much an advantage, but something that makes it what it is. America is an especially bullshit country in comparison to other ones. It's more bullshit than Europe, but that's sort of why they get ahead, because they're willing to be bullshit. Because bullshit, being fake, is unnatural. It's natural to be real, or like primitive, or whatever it is. Not be capitalistic, not be materialistic. It's more unnatural to be materialistic and try to make money off of things, create enterprises that make money. That's unnatural because whatever it is, like Ross Furniture, Ashley Furniture Store, this block of a building with parking lot where they asphalted over the natural rolling hills of nature. They made everything blocks and like right angles and shit like that. Whatever, all businesses are doing shit like that. They are an affront to nature, because money goes in an unnatural direction like that. When you're materializing things, that's fake, because you're pretending that you have something to say, or like pretending that you have a business that's worth it to people, like to create a product or whatever. Say that you have a product. You don't have a product. Nobody does. You like the Joe Rogan Experience. That's some more real podcast than other ones, but like any podcast, whatever. Theo Vaughn, like, podcasts are complete bullshit, but yet there's an explosion of them in the last 15 years. It's because the world heads in a fake direction as long as technology is improving. It's just like the landscape of America allows for a lot of bullshit because of the freedom. When you have the kind of freedom that America gives to people, everybody's just going to be coming up with whatever bullshit, like all of the inventors and whatever, like so much of the shit that's impacted the globe, everybody, like cell phones and cars and airplanes, they're all like invented in America. But that's because America allows for a bunch of bullshitters. And right now in America, like, America decided, oh, we don't like bullshit anymore. But it's really just that people are being intolerant and critical unnecessarily, way too much, because they're afraid of people. I think when it came out that the vaccine was bullshit, that the news and whoever was lying to you by saying like, oh, we're on the side of standardized medicine, and so this is a foolproof way to go, is to listen to us, because if you don't, you'll be listening to loonies who believe in holistic medicine or whatever. I think when it was found out that the vaccine isn't all that great, that the people that got it just like went crazy, and they went into super over control mode to control all of the people that were right about the vaccine, like conspiracy theorists. Like, people doubled down where they're like, no, actually, bullshitters are still wrong no matter what, and we don't even have tolerance. We're not going to listen to any of that. like somebody like me, I'm a bullshitter conspiracy theorist generally, or like that's how I would have identified myself before the vaccine. I didn't get the vaccine. But like what I was going to say is that whatever, it's like probably 90% of what comes out of people's mouths is bullshit, but not literal bullshit, not like bullshit. It's just like lies or half truths or just propaganda. Like, you ever notice how just the things that somebody is saying are like so related to their position in life? Where it's like if somebody who's married, they'll just send out pro-marriage messages generally, even if they're not trying to. Or somebody who's single will send out like pro-single messages. You notice how like the things that people are talking about are often just propaganda for their own missions, even when they're not trying to. And because people are just narcissists, every one of them, everybody is a narcissist because like you're walking around on your own. You're not sewed to another person. You're not like connected to another person physically. People are alone individuals walking around in the world. They are promoting themselves. Like, what else would they be talking about? But it's like the same as a podcast, like the Joe Rogan Experience. 90% of the episodes are crap. Like the content, you have to produce content. Most of the shit that you put up is crap. It's the same with just people talking. 90% of it is crap, and so it's like people need to stop being so judgmental, to be like, well, actually people when they're talking, we don't have to listen to you unless you really have something to say. But it's like Twitter versus Instagram. There's one of my throat clears. I do those throat clears. I've listened to a couple episodes back just when I edited them. I would never listen to an episode I made after it was already on the internet, because I'm horrified by this experience generally. Like, I want to forget about it later on. Not that, only in the respect that everybody's podcast is horrifying. Everybody should be horrified that they put content up on the internet for like everybody to see forever. It's horrible. The nation is horrible. It's a shitty, like, going to jobs, the thing that we all complain about all the time. It's like, oh, I don't want to go to my desk job. Like, beyond all of the noise about how bad that is, it is crap. Like the nation is horrible. Like, just the scheduling of it. What's horrible is that everybody goes to work at the same time, and then I can't contact my landlord because everybody in the nation was like, oh, we'll take these 8 hours the same and work, because like sleeping and then going to work, that everybody does it the same, is crap or whatever. It's really just horrible that the climate, the culture works to crush an original thought that somebody would say. I don't know. I forget what was significant about. It's something I thought about a couple days ago. Like, when I felt it at the moment, I could have talked about it. About the horribleness. I mean, I've discussed the horribleness before, but just how it's just like everybody trying to look good. That's America to the rest of the world. It's like, if you look good to everybody else around you, you're doing shitty internally, and that's America. America looks, at least for a long time, looked good to everybody else in the world, but they're doing shitty internally. That's America. That's the United States. They're doing shitty internally because it's a clown world in the borders of the country. It's like fake shit, appearances shit, Instagram nonsense. But it's just that there are people that virtue signal and there are people that vice signal. And people that look good, and then people who don't, who like want to look bad on the surface, and people who want to look good on the surface. Like, virtue signaling is not a bad thing as much as conservatives would like to shit on it. It's just that conservatives are bitter because people judge books by their cover, and conservatives look ugly on the front, and so they're bitter at people who virtue signal, or in other words, send signs out to the world and communicate to the world that they're good people. Like, virtue signaling isn't bad, because it's not a bad thing to give signs to other people that you're a good person. Like, communicate, look, I'm trying to show you that I'm a good person, or whatever. Like, that's not a bad thing. But conservatives are like, oh, you're virtue signaling, you're just trying to look good. So the difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is that Trump vice signals and Hillary Clinton virtue signaled. Like, before the election, everything that you heard about Hillary Clinton is that she's good, and like, she's on the left. The Democrats are on the side of equality and open-mindedness, or whatever it is, because they say that they are, because they virtue signal, because they're trying to show everybody else, oh, we're good. But that's like what the right hates about the left, and what the left hates about the right is that the right vice signals, or is like purposefully looks racist on the surface, or whatever it is. I mean, like, not on purpose. Trump isn't trying to look like a racist, but it's just like, because he's not virtue signaling, people are like, oh, you're not giving enough sign, you're not purposefully trying to show on the surface that you're good, and so that's why we hate you. And then as a result, everything you hear leading up to the election in 2016 is that Trump is horrible and he's going to lose the election, and you're an idiot if you're on his side, and Hillary Clinton is amazing and she's really good, and whatever. And it's just the virtue signalers versus the vice signalers, and at the end of the day, it's actually just 50-50, but the virtue signalers control, like, just are on the side of good press or looking good. And that's the difference between Twitter and Instagram. Is like, I go onto Twitter and I say whatever I do on Twitter, and I tweet in order to look good. And I'd say that, like, a conservative person, like, obviously I'm ending up like, comparing myself to Trump, but that's what people are there for. Like, leaders like that, they take up that high of a position of responsibility in order for a large group of people to like see themselves in that. So it's like, I'm not trying to compare myself to Trump. He's just like put himself up so high that he's an easy example to use, as with any leader. But like, Trump isn't doing anything he does to look bad, even though press makes it like he is. He's trying to look good. It's the same with like, because I'm more of a Twitter person than an Instagram person, I want to look good on Twitter. There are some people that want to look good on Instagram. It's kind of like the difference between vice signaling and virtue signaling, because Twitter is just like a argument fest, where like mudslinging generally. And if you're looking good on Twitter, it's because you're winning a competition. Instagram isn't like that. It's everybody likes everybody's photos, or it's not like evidently a competition, and that's why people like it and why it gets better press in comparison to Twitter, because that Twitter gets bad press because all of the vice signalers are the people on Twitter. The people who want to look good through winning arguments are on Twitter, or like Donald Trump, for example. But it's like, I don't go onto Twitter. I'm saying that the entire point of Twitter is to look good, even though the press would say that people on there are just trying to look bad, or it makes you look bad. The entire reason I would ever be on there is to look good, even though it's like counterintuitive, because if you're somebody who wanted to look good, wouldn't you like be on Instagram putting out photos of yourself? It's just that I'm a vice signaler, and other people are virtue signalers. But virtue signaler is just like you're not going to do well on Twitter. But Jack Harlow versus MGK is the same thing. Like Jack Harlow's music sucks, but everybody likes him, basically just because he's an interview. Well, like Jack Harlow goes on Amelia de Moldenberg's show, the Chicken Shop Date or whatever. I not that I don't know. That's the only thing she does, or that's what she's famous for. But because he's just a pop culture, because he's got a TV personality, because he's an interview, people like Jack Harlow. It doesn't make any sense, really. It's the death of music that, oh, people like Jack Harlow. But at the end of the day, it's 50-50. It's like, even though Jack Harlow gets all the good press and MGK gets all the bad press, it's like MGK is a billion times better at musically than Jack Harlow is. But it's the same with like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Like, or I mean, it's similar. Like, Donald Trump would be a way better president than Hillary Clinton because he would actually change things, or he might try to unfuck up the horrible fucking system that politics is, that Washington is. Hillary Clinton is just going to make it continue to be shitty. Jack Harlow is just going to... He's not going to say anything original. He's just going to be a face of positivity in an industry that should be rewarding rule breakers like MGK. Like it's... music is supposed to be for the people who rock the hardest or whatever. Jack Harlow is just like a pretty boy. And he's the one... Like, Jack Harlow comes out with a song about being the greatest white rapper since Eminem. And people are just like, oh, okay, I guess. I mean, that's not a great thing to say, but people are like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. Just because Jack Harlow is an interview. But MGK is so much better an artist and a musician in every single way, because MGK actually will make a diss track at Eminem, and then Eminem responds with a diss track. It's so much more risky to do that, especially at Eminem. You can't just launch a diss track at Eminem when he's so famous for using his words to diss people. And Jack Harlow's never going to make a diss track at Eminem. And for that reason alone, he is not in any way ever qualified to say he's the greatest white rapper since Eminem. MGK is the rightful heir to the throne, certainly. In all seriousness, I think that given enough time, people would realize that. But like, Jack Harlow's just a dork, and like an interview, he's just a TV personality. He's a virtue signaler. MGK gets all the bad press. Like, people hate him. Just because he's a vice signaler, or he looks like a bad boy, or looks like he's sinning, or doesn't say he's on the side, like he says he's on the side of Satan more so. Like, as far as you could tell about what he's saying like, I'm not on the side of Jesus. And so because of that, people hate him or whatever. And I just think, I mean, maybe it's the group of people that got the vaccine and then they figured out that they were lied to, and then they got really angry after that and just decided to pathologically lie to anybody who is doing anything original. Or, I mean, is that the reason why Jack Harlow and NF get propped up like they are? Like, why are they accepted musically on a widespread level? It's so backwards when MGK actually makes good music and people just shit on him only because he doesn't look good on the surface. It's like, why is good music so unrewarded now in today's world? Was it always that way? Was it that way? I mean, like, it wasn't that way when the Beatles came out. They were the best music and everybody liked them. But nowadays, it's like, if you're making something good, it's culturally accepted that we hate you. It's so backwards. It's like the culture is just full of pathological liars. or like that's the cultural thing. That's the cultural thing that's happening. That's what it's supposed to be. Because it's not like NF makes good music, but he gets a contract with Rocket League. I I play Rocket League, and I do. I mean, I'm saying Rocket League has a really good soundtrack most of the time. I don't know how NF's new music got on there, because it's just as bad as it's ever been. Like, I think people make fun of NF sort of, but like not nearly to the degree that they should. Probably because he's a Christian, and it's just a bunch of Christians that are like, "Oh yeah, he makes great music. Don't ask any questions." Christians ruin the culture by living lives that mock authority. Like, I mean, don't even make me get into it. I don't even want to get into it. But it's just like when Christians go into their churches and but this is like always an unpopular opinion. When Christian people go into churches and then they are gaining authority in the name of the cross, it's a bunch of magic. But Jesus was a magician, really. And if he wasn't, there's nobody that would be able to say otherwise. Nobody could prove that he wasn't. Like, he rose from the dead. How does anybody know he wasn't just David Blaining on some folks back then, before people knew that like David Blaine level of magic was even possible? I mean, without David Blaine, I wouldn't think that David Blaine level of magic was possible. But I guess a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's just bullshitting." How could you argue with what David Blaine does if you're like being honest? You're being serious. There are hundreds of eyewitnesses that see his crazy stunts, and he does insane shit right in front of people, like put a giant needle through his hand in one end and then out the other side. And he has plenty of eyewitnesses that see him do all kinds of different crazy things. And this kind of thing is definitely possible. And the argument that Jesus is a magician is, like, you have to recognize it, because he's going around turning water into wine. That sounds like something a magician would do. And he didn't like the leaders of the synagogues, and that's equivalent of that today is pastors of churches and people that follow him. He didn't like organized religion. And so, like, why are all these people in churches organizing religions around his name? I think they completely miss the point. Christians miss the point in whatever they're doing, worshiping Jesus. Like, Jesus didn't like organized religion. He didn't like pastors. He came and he was like, "Oh, you can talk to God directly. You don't need these middlemen that are bullshitters saying that they are appointed by God." Like, I don't know. I think that I mean I don't know, you know. Who does know? Christians say that they do. Christians say that they know, but I think that they miss the point. But the Magi isn't, you can't ignore that motif either. The Magi were there when he was born, because Jesus was somebody who knew things. He was a magician. Like, but it's just that Christians of today are the Pharisees of Jesus' time. The pastors and the people who follow the pastors are like the Pharisees that Jesus condemned when he walked the earth. Because I think it's kind of like when Donald Trump comes around, and then you have all of these celebrities that just can't get over the example of Donald Trump in life. And like CNN and Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers and all these, you get all of these people and like anchors on CNN that they're so flabbergasted by Trump showing up and doing what he does, like, that they can't get his name off of their lips. All they can do is spit out Trump 100,000 times over and over and over again. That's what CNN does since Trump showed up. And Christians are the same way with Christ. When Christ showed up, and his example was so magnificent, like that for thousands of years after, there are all of these people that just can't stop spitting out his name over and over again because they're just so like, they think it's so crazy that he showed up, and they're also just worshiping the moment that he failed when he died on the cross more than any other moment. And that's the thing that they put on their churches, is Jesus' biggest failure. And then they're going into their churches under the shadow of the cross, like gathering authority in that, gathering magic in the name of that, saying that they have some sort of authority. And this authority that they claim to have gives them the power to define everybody else around them, gives them the power to be the judges of the world more than anybody else, according to them, as long as you have to listen to them. But they get that authority by committing to a persona, committing to a thing, a specific job title, Christian, longer than anybody else, like 24/7. And it really just mocks the world, because the world, people in the world are out here being a delivery man 8 hours, 40 hours of the week. That kind of authority doesn't even touch what Christians do, because Christians are Christian 24/7, if you really believe that thing. But it mocks, they mostly just serve to mock Jesus, I think. That, like, people who are fans, people who just worship the person, that can't get over them, it's not that bad of a thing that they're going to be fans no matter what. It's just that, like, you can't deny that they're sort of like fans, or that they're because they're whatever, they're trying to be like Jesus. But because Jesus didn't like organized religion. Privilege. Jesus was so privileged. He's like the most privileged person of all time. If you're worshiping Jesus, you're worshiping the most privileged person, somebody who's privy to secrets. Nobody had more inside knowledge than Jesus did, ever. He's so privileged, but it's just that people throw the word privilege around, and that's bullshit. And made it because privilege applies to everything. Blind people have the privilege of being blind, so you don't get to tell people that they're a bad person just because they have privilege. Everybody has privilege, but there's like thousands of privileges that nobody would ever want, that people are actually burdened with, and it's a horrible situation. That anybody judges somebody by being like, oh, you're privileged, based on the way that you look or the way that it seems like you are, when they don't know the drawbacks to what you are. Like, the drawbacks of a person are their privileges as well. The secrets that you have to keep, that you wouldn't want anybody to know, are privileges that you have that other people don't. Like the Children of the Corn, the movie, the participants in that religion in that town, in the Children of the Corn, they had the privilege of living in that tiny cult that the surrounding world knew nothing about. The surrounding world knew nothing about that cult was going on, and there's just like this secret going on, but it's only those people have the privilege of knowing that that's happening, because privilege is privilege. Only the kids that were in the town of the Children of the Corn knew about that. But like, so that's a privilege they had. That doesn't mean that it's a good thing. There's just so many privileges that are bad. People act like, it's just that people use this term to judge other people because they're exploiting a misconception about the word, where there's not enough knowledge about the full territory, the full expanse of what privilege means. And I mean, it eventually sheds light on it, because when you get people like me who clap back at people who are using privilege just to lord it over people or tell them that they're a bad person, and it's wrong and it's unnatural, because people are lying about what privilege is. They're acting like it's always good, and when it's actually bad some of the time. But that's like when a lie is happening, is when people are saying, oh, this thing is always good or this thing is always bad, like when something is idealistic or whatever. But like looking at Jesus like an ideal, that the same as what Christians do, is wrong, I would say, but it's treated like it is good and moral, because I think that what you need to find is that you're like Jesus, and that's what the Bible is saying. The knowledge of good and evil. Like if you crossed out of the church, what you would find out is that you were like Jesus, not you. Instead of that, he is this ideal that you are always below. Like that is the epitome of the knowledge of good and evil, or something close to that. Like the Bible, Christians are trapped, or people who have to listen to the Bible first. They're trapped in the Bible, and the Bible casts a spell over its readers with the preface of the book, like the opening. I mean, whatever. The entire thing is a spell book. The entire thing is a magic book. In order for it to last this long and have the power that it has over people, is very magical book. Very magical things going on in Christian churches where they go to gather secretly. You don't know what it is that, like, there's secret sentences that you say in order to be a Christian, or like arrive at the level of belief that you need to have. It has to do with belief, and belief is this magical thing where you hypnotize yourself to think that, oh, this world is actually the true world. But it's like if you make your belief a specific thing, that's you entering into a closed society. Like people need to decentralize their belief so that they allot belief for a number of different topics. Belief should not all be gathered or directed towards one thing, because if that's the case, then you're not going to have belief left over for like the individual people around you, and especially not for people that don't believe in the same thing as you. And that's why Christian activity is just is abhorrent, or it should be seen that way. It's because they don't have any belief left over for human beings, because they are purposefully not humanistic religion, or purposefully not humanistic belief system. And like oh shit, what was I just saying? What I was just saying was privilege, the knowledge of good and evil, that when Adam and Eve ate from the tree, they crossed some threshold where they became like God. And an important thing about that is that becoming like God is the same as becoming comparable to God. I mean, I don't know. Christians are like Jesus when they're within the church. So there is something different about Jesus than there is about God in that situation, definitely. So that's not, I am saying it kind of wrong, because being like Jesus is different from being like God. Definitely. The way that the Adam and Eve said what it's like to be like God. But when Adam and Eve ate from the tree, they became like God, or in other words, they became comparable to God, or in other words, they became competitive with God. Because think about what it was like before they ate from the tree. Their relationship to God, it's unspecified by the Bible, but you can surmise that it was unlike God. I would say that it was more like God was everything and they were nothing, or they knew nothing about the difference. They knew nothing about competition. They knew that, like, eating from the tree is the introduction of competition into the world, according to what the Bible is saying about it, what it was like for Adam and Eve to eat from the tree. Then now they become like God, or in other words, they see themselves to be like God. comparable with him, competitive, or they could produce some of the same things, but now they're just in this big game with God, the same as whatever game that the Bible is, that it's introduced through this. Humans are now in this new game where the rules are something about trying to be like God, and that's what humans are always doing, is that they're trying, when they enter some enterprise or make some new thing, when they get materialistic to make money or create some new idea, invent something, they're trying to be like God. That's the world that we entered into. It's like a progression. I mean, I think that the story symbolizes that humans cross this threshold where they're now okay with like being intelligent about things or inventing things or like communicating language. Maybe it symbolizes like the first time that we're able to use words. It's the point that we became smart, became intelligent. But like, what I want to mention is that the knowledge of good and evil to me seems like when Santa Claus, like believing in Santa. And I know that I'm sounding ridiculous, but like, it's the same as there's this threshold between the people who believe in Santa, the people that don't. And when you cross over that, when you figure out the real shit about Santa, that he's not real or whatever, that's the point at which you become like Santa. Where Santa is like God in this scenario that I'm proposing to you. But, or in other words, you realize that Santa isn't this idealistic image. Like, he's not this, he's like so far distant, like he has all these powers that are so magical, so far above us. What you realize when you realize that he's not real is that adults and the people around you are Santa, you know, like that's what's putting it on. That's what's putting presents under the tree. Like, people are like that. They compete with him in that way. It has to do with privilege. It has to do with knowing, but it's really like, what is the moral of what I'm saying to you? Like, what is my message? My message is that I want credit for saying all of these things. I'm going to... The NFTs that'll tokenize this podcast and make it a bullshit extravaganza are on their way. At the point that I do that, it'll be the same thing as when Lil Nas X made the song Old Town Road, and officially merging the genres of hip-hop and country, which they had bordered on merging before that, because people were making shit that was merger of country and hip hop. Like, people in the shadows were doing that. It's just that there was no standard for it until Lil Nas X officially popularized the merger of the two genres. And the two genres are never the same after that. I am making the merger equivalent podcasts and cryptocurrencies, and neither of the two will ever be the same after the shit that I make, because this is the best podcast on the internet, because I know that the only thing you have to do is contribute something original or try to say something that somebody hasn't heard before. I'm out of my mind, and like, I do believe the things that I'm saying, and I am this arrogant, and like, I'll take on an entire religion, and like, I'm better than all of Christianity. But like, just because other people aren't willing to go that far because they're afraid the world will judge them for being pretentious or not being able to back it up immediately, because the world is like instantly critical of anybody who looks like they are trying to say something about themselves or whatever, because that's the thing that we hate. That's the thing we can all agree on is shitty, is when somebody looks arrogant or something. I mean, not necessarily. Saying that you're famous when you're not. It's not that bad. It's not that bad a thing to joke about it. But like, I'm just trying to explain to you what I'm doing. But the moral, here it is. What I have to say that's important about the things that I've said to this point is that it's better to not know. I guess I made an episode called Knowledge where I was bordering on this. That was an episode that I made. It was called Knowledge. But this is a book I'm making. Like this is a album. It's not it's not like other people's shit that they make. I don't need to outline it. Is it better to outline it, or is that just bad? Is that just bad material? It goes a little bit further. It's the same as like a famous person stepping out and being like, "Oh, I'm famous. I do make these pop songs." Like you have to pretend that you are in order to be that, and that's what's so difficult about it. That's why so few people make it, or whatever it is. Um, I'm sick in the head, but like, just hear me out for a few minutes more. Despite my sickness, despite my immorality. Anyway, it's better to not know. Like the way that you win the game, because these are games. Like the Bible is a game, and there are a lot of people that play it by being trapped in it and like immortalizing the stories in it and idealizing them way too much. Like it's better to be outside of the Bible. It's better to be outside of Christianity so that you're not subject to it. You're subject to it when you're forced to look at it like it's always an ideal, or in other words, an absolute 100%, like a complete truth. It's always truth is relative, but like you can win the game by saying you don't know because there's so much power in not knowing. Like if you were a kid and adults came to you and they're like, Santa is real. He does whatever, goes around the world. He has elves and make toys for everybody in the world. And then one night of the year, whatever it is, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, bullshit that adults are perfectly comfortable telling their kids. And it's not some simple lie. This is like a serious thing. They're telling you that there's this God that watches you when you're sleeping and whatever. And all of these adults are people that write those songs with those words that he sees you when you're sleeping in order to make money off of it. And it's just a big joke that they play on innocents, kids that know nothing about it. But in reality, adults are not any better than kids just because they know the thing. They know that Santa's not real. Kids don't. It's the same with the knowledge of good and evil. Like, it doesn't say the unknowledge. The knowledge of good and evil doesn't say anything about not knowing. And that's the game that you get trapped in when you start reading the Bible, is that it's always a competition. It's always winners and losers. That's what the Bible brings about, or just by like that there is a game. They're saying, "Oh, enter into this." There definitely is a game. You can win the game. I guess you can win any game by being like, "Oh, I don't know," because if a kid was presented with that information about Santa and they just said, "Oh, I don't know anything about that," um, they're then they're correct. They win the game, and they're not by not playing it. Because if a kid was smart enough to be like, "Oh shit, there's no evidence for that. I don't know anything about those claims," then they win the game and they're better than all of the adults that are trying to pull one over on them, because the adults are just as bad because they're playing the knowledge game. They're just saying like, "Oh, we're the winners and you guys are the losers." Um, like the Bible is like that, and Christians are like that. Christians are like, "Oh, we're the winners because we know about the knowledge, because we have the best knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, that world, the world that is incited by this specific version of knowledge, which is the best knowledge, the one correlated directly with the Bible or whatever." They're like, "Oh, we're the winners. Everybody that we get to judge all the time, they're the losers." It's sort of like that, but what's more important is just like not knowing, the power of not knowing. Like, people, let me give you a better example. People who think that they're so smart for saying that cryptocurrency isn't a thing. So you're like, "We know that that's a scam." They aren't any better than the people who say that they know that it's going to work, because both of those people are playing the game. Because how do you sit around and say that you know cryptocurrency is a scam when it's this thing that proves itself to be a reality every single day since it started existing 10 years ago? There's nobody on earth that knows what's going to happen with it. So you're not better than people who say they know it'll work if you say you know that it won't, because you're saying you have the utmost knowledge of the subject as well. You know, what the correct answer to cryptocurrency is, I don't know anything about that. And that's something I heard Tony Hinchcliffe say once a couple years ago, like in an interview. And I had been trying to figure out what he meant ever since, but I figured it out, because Tony Hinchcliffe is a genius. And like, the same way as somebody else would like follow Jesus, I would want to follow Tony Hinchcliffe. Like, he's God to me. Like, I would want to follow his footsteps because like, he's an ideal to me. I think it's better to make an ideal out of a person who is like flesh and blood tangibly in front of you. That way you won't go into La La Land, where your ideals are people that you've never met and never seen. But like, the correct answer is to cryptocurrency is I don't know, because there's nobody that knows if it's going to work or not. And so that's what I say about it. Is at this point, I don't know. And so I invest in it as somebody who's optimistic towards it. Like, hopefully it works out. I don't know. I've never felt like I knew. And people who invest in it generally aren't like, oh, it's for certain it's going to work out, especially since the rest of the world is constantly scolding them for involving themselves in it, because the rest of the world is so fucking smart, or whatever it is. They're like, oh no, we know it's a scam and you're stupid for involving in it, but they're not better than people who say it's going to work, because they say they have knowledge the same way. They're playing that same game. But it's like the same with the Santa situation. Like, the Adam and Eve story is too profound that maybe I could like really logically explain why that's the same. Like, it's just that the divide that happens between people who know and then people who don't know, and that when Adam and Eve entered into the knowledge world, I don't know. I can't like can't exactly explain. It's just that the money that gets made off of a divide and off of secrets, off of some people being privy to secrets and some people not, like all of the Santa Claus theme parks that they're able to make just because there's this large group of people, children, that are idealizing Santa. Like, Jesus is the same way. That's what pastors of churches do. They take advantage of people that idealize Jesus and make money off of it. It's not like very obvious that pastors have bad intentions, and they probably don't. It's just like, that's what the result is when you don't need to have organized religion. And especially when Jesus came and went, and he's the greatest to ever live, and he hated synagogues, and he hated the leaders of them. He hated organized religion, and that's what his example was. And if you're sitting around worshiping the guy that did that, I'd like, you miss the point, and like, the privilege of it. You're manufacturing. People are manufacturing privilege. Pastors of churches themselves are creating this closed society for people to gather for belief that exists only within the church for other people that go to it. Like, pastors of churches are creating this divide between churches, people within them, and then the rest of the world, so that there's like, oh, the privilege of being in here, and it's manufactured privilege. It's just like, when there's a divide like that, competitively between the group of people that knows and then the group of people. But I'm talking about like relative truths. Like, the knowledge of good and evil presents a world of relative truths where there are winners and losers. Losers have knowledge and winners have knowledge. The same with Santa Claus. The winners are like the adults and the losers are the kids. But like, the knowledge of good and evil presents this same thing, where once you're in that world, you're just in a world of comparable truths, but it's like the Freemasons believe that good and evil are equal to each other, or in other words, they aren't competitive. There aren't winners and losers, and that's like Freemasons practice a lot of Satanism. Like, in the direction of Satanism is the direction of saying good and evil are equal rather than they're competitive. But Christianity has to have a competitive world in order to exist at all, because they're saying that they have a truth that other people don't have. And you know that that's evident because they're like gathering in a space that is like definable to them, that somebody is making money off of it, but it's just an enterprise. But like shoot, the last thing I was going to say was Jesus is a nice man, good for him. But anyway, like with the Santa Claus thing, it's just like the winners and losers. The adults are winners and kids are losers. But it's like with Santa Claus, no, it's the same with cryptocurrency. The correct answer is I don't know. And it should be that answer for the adults as well, because this thing exists. Whatever the reality of this is, despite people interpreting different sides of the dividing line differently, the dividing line can't be controlled. Like, whatever it is that produces this division, that people find it necessary. Like, Jesus. Jesus is the division between Christians and the rest of the world. Like, that reality exists no matter what. But the correct answer is I don't know what he did. I don't know if he was just a magician, like that there is something normal about this seemingly very paranormal situation. Usually with paranormal situations, it's just that people haven't figured out the normal part of it. And so it exists as this like completely godlike, like, oh, who knows? That's undefinable to us because we don't know anything about it. Something that is totally godlike is just waiting for people to break it down or make it definable or make it normal. Something that's paranormal is just something that's waiting to be made normal, I think, and will eventually be made normal. Like ghosts, we don't have the words to describe why that's happening, but at some point some science technology will develop to explain to us, like, okay, these are why there are ghosts. And Jesus is this unexplainable thing. Maybe it's something normal, like he was just a magician, like something that could actually be explainable. But the correct answer is nobody knows. For both sides, for people who are not Christians, people who are. You bypass the game by saying you don't know. But I guess what I am consistently saying is how knowledge is always a game. But it's like the dividing line between people who think Santa is real and people who don't. Kids and adults. This Santa situation happens no matter what. And it's like nobody gets to control that. Like, this is a reality. I don't know what's behind it. I don't know. There's something, it's not what either of the two groups of people say that it is. But when people try to control the line, and people do that, whatever. You have to do games. You have to enter. You have to. I don't know. It's not a bad thing to have knowledge. I like competition more. It's just that some competitions are too powerful, like massive organized religions. The game that's presented by Islam is so vast, so complicated. It's worth so much money. Like big knowledge. I don't like big knowledge. Big knowledge is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Too much of a monopoly. Knowledge needs to be more decentralized. Belief needs to be more decentralized. I'm a heretic. I am not a nice guy. And all of those things that I said, and me being the person that said them, and that I'm the person that says all those things, laying claim to them. I guess people could write me off, acting like I don't know. I don't know what people think about me. I just maybe get it in my head that everybody hates me. It's not. I don't need to do that because they don't. They don't communicate to me that they do. It's just like for lack of response, and the fact that most of the responses that I do get seem to be negative, just in response to me, in relation to me putting forward original things. That's what everybody gets. Everybody gets flack for being original. Is because it's more responsible, because you have to respond for the things that you say more, and people attack it faster because the world is just trying to survive. Oh, whoops. I got off of my stream. Great. I probably only hit 2 shots this entire time. That's all right. But thank you for listening. Sayonara.